Well, good evening everyone and welcome to this annual general meeting of Devonport City Council. I'm pleased to see so many of you here this evening. I would like to begin by introducing our councillors and our staff. I would ask the councillors, the Deputy Mayor and the councillors to stand up and perhaps just turn around, make sure everyone knows who you are. Thank you. And on my left is our General Manager, Matthew Atkins, and beside me on my right is our Deputy General Manager, Jeff Griffith. Beside him is Matthew Skirving, and he is our Executive Manager of City Growth, and beside him is Kim Peebles, who's the Executive Manager of People and Finance. We also have some staff members present and members and ratepayers in our community, so thank you all for coming. In beginning our council meeting, I would like to acknowledge and pay respects to the Tasmanian Aboriginal community as the traditional and original custodians of the land on which we meet, and acknowledge their elders past, present and emerging. All persons in attendance are advised that it is council policy to record council meetings in accordance with council's digital recording policy. The digital recording of this meeting will be made available to the public on council's website. The meeting is also being live streamed on council's YouTube channel. This annual meeting will be conducted in, as far as practical, in the manner of similar to ordinary council meetings and generally align with the processes set out in the local government regulations of 2015. There are some motions in our agenda and they have been submitted prior to this meeting. The motions must be moved and seconded before debate can begin, and only one motion will be before the chair at any one time. Only electors of the Devonport local government area are eligible to vote, and a resolution is passed by a majority of voters taken by a show of hands. In speaking to a motion, each person may speak only once and for a maximum of 3 minutes, and the mover of the motion has a final right of reply. A motion passed at the annual general meeting is to be considered at the next available council meeting. The process for questions without notice will generally be in accordance with council's public question time policy and will be part of general business at the end of the meeting. Those wishing to speak at the meeting are to come to the lectern and identify themselves by providing their name and address, and to limit their comments and questions to no more than 3 minutes on any item. No person may make any personal reflection on any councillor, council employee or another member of the public. You may not disrupt the meeting and you may not, in my opinion, use an offensive expression. There's formalities underway. Item 2 is apologies. Would you like to come to the lectern, please?
Madam Mayor, my name is Graham Nevin, 145 Percy Street, Devonport. I request clarification regarding the meeting procedures for this annual general meeting. Item 1 of the guidelines in the agenda refers to the Local Government Meeting Procedures Regulations 2015. The clarification sought is, does Regulation 28, Sub-Regulation 3, apply to this meeting?
I will seek advice from my General Manager. Thank you.
If it assists you, Madam Chairman, that regulation refers to voting, and in particular that abstention from voting is regarded as a vote against the motion. So does that, is an abstention a vote against a motion, or is an abstention at this meeting?
I'll seek the General Manager's advice. Thank you, Mr Nevin. Thank you for the clarification.
The other points of clarification, do regulations 20, 21, 22 and 23 apply to this meeting? Thank you.
Yeah, it's through you, Madam Mayor. The advice in regard to voting, it's a majority of those people that vote is declared whether the motion is passed or not. So there needs to be a majority of those people that actually vote.
No, he's recorded as an abstention. That's my understanding of the General Manager's.
Correct.
Thank you. And, oh, sorry, in relation to the other question?
Can I just clarify, Madam Mayor, which regulations were the other two?
Regulation 20, 21, 22 and 23. So that relates to procedural motions, addressing council meeting, debate at a council meeting and points of order in relation to a meeting.
Yeah.
Just so we all understand what the procedures are, because I cannot determine it from the guidelines.
Through you, Madam Mayor, my advice would be rule number 1 for the annual general meeting guidelines is that as far as practicable, the meeting regs would apply. I think there's discretion there as chair when, in the specific instances. However, where possible, those regulations would apply, would be my advice.
Do they apply or don't they? That's a simple
They
question.
apply unless I decide otherwise, Mr Nevin.
So
Thank you.
when will we know which ones do and which ones
I
don't?
will let you know. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Item 2 is apologies. Do we have any apologies from anyone to be recorded at this meeting? Mr Race, thank you. Were there any others? Graham Kent. Are there any other apologies? Thank you. Item 3 is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest in any item on this agenda? I would ask if there are declarations of interest, I would ask you to go to the lectern and tell me which items you're declaring an interest and whether you're leaving the room or not, and if not, why not. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Lee Murphy will declare an interest in items 7.4 and 7.5, having previously been involved in that council decision. I will be staying in the room to ensure that we do have a quorum for the debate.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Councillor Milbourne.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. 7.4 and 7.5 for the reasons previously discussed. Thank you. 7.4 and 7.5 for the reasons previously discussed.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Out of an abundance of caution, given the heightened sensitivity around Code of Conduct findings in recent times, I'll declare an interest in items 7.4 and 7.5. However, in line with a recent Code of Conduct workshop that we held, or conflict of interest workshop, I will be staying in the room. I won't be participating in debate, and I won't be voting, and I won't be exuding any body language, and I won't be seeking to persuade anyone on how they should think or how they should vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. Can I just clarify, Councillor Milbourne, will you be staying in the room for the debate? Thank you. Councillor Laycock.
Madam Mayor, I'll be declaring an interest, a conflict of interest, in agenda items 7.4 and 7.5 after receiving information on recent conflict of interest at a recent workshop. I'll remain in the room out of necessity of maintaining a quorum for the agenda items, but will not take part in the debate or vote on either of these agenda items.
Thank you. Councillor Hollister.
7.4 and 7.5, to declare a conflict for the obvious reasons as everybody else. I'll be staying in the room.
Thank you, Councillor
So
Hollister. Are there any
retain a
other
quorum.
declarations of possible or perceived conflict of interest in any item on the agenda? I too will be declaring a perceived or possible conflict of interest in items 7.4 and 7.5, and I will be asking the Deputy Mayor to take the chair during the debate of those two items. I will not be leaving the room, given the recent advice that we have had. Are there any other declarations of interest in any other item on the agenda? Thank you. Item 4.1 is confirmation of the minutes of the annual general meeting of the 9th of November 2020. Do I have a mover of the recommendation for those minutes, please? Thank you, Councillor. Mr Goodwin, thank you. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Ms Sayers, thank you. Did you wish to speak to the motion, Mr Goodwin? Thank you. Ms Sayers, nothing to add? Are there any other comments? I'll ask you to close the debate. Mr Goodwin. Thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Are there any against? Yes, okay, I will ask for a show of hands. Could I have a staff member please do some counting? All those in favour of the motion, please raise your hand. And those against, please raise your hand. Can I just have those hands up again for against, please? So 22 for and 9 against. The motion is carried. Thank you. Moving on, item 5 is a presentation of the annual report, and the General Manager will provide a brief overview of the year's events. Thank you, Mr Atkins.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor, for the opportunity just to provide a brief overview on the annual report. The report's available on Council's website, and I'd encourage, if you haven't done so, to take the time to have a read through it. There is a copy up on the screen, and I'll just comment on a few of the highlights. So the annual report aligns with Council's strategic plan, the 2009 to 2030 strategic plan. The first section of the report provides some background information in regard to Council, and then the report's broken into the 5 strategic goals that Council has, and the strategies and actions that have been delivered through the year are lined up underneath each of those goals. And then there's a full copy of the audited financial statements that come with the annual report. So in preparing the annual report, it's highlighted how the last 12 months has certainly been a story of two realities. The financial year began with great uncertainty and caution. The North West Coast had just come through a 3-week lockdown, something that's all too familiar now, but unprecedented back at that time. The impact of a worldwide pandemic and the fear of the unknown was evident across our community, and Council braced for a challenging year. Rates and charges were frozen, income projections were down 3 million, operational spending was aggressively reduced, and community support initiatives were built into a budget which was forecast to deliver a $2.2 million deficit. But in contrast, the year has brought record development applications and building permits, a buoyant economy, a booming property market, and unprecedented construction activity. With income levels holding up and by maintaining controls on expenditure, Council ended the year with a $4.2 million turnaround on budget, delivering an operating surplus of $2 million. This is a solid financial result and consolidates Council's strong long-term financial position. However, the year was far from normal, with some sectors across the community continuing to see significant disruption. Major annual events and festivals were cancelled or reimagined, and COVID restrictions were impacting on our lives. Certainly isolation from mainland Australia was being particularly difficult for those in our community with loved ones interstate. So really, Mayor, the 2021 financial year has certainly been a story of two realities. The Devonport City Council was established under the Local Government Act 1993. Council's made up of 9 elected members who serve a 4-year term on an all-in, all-out basis, with the next election due in October 2022. As staff, we see firsthand the significant commitment and dedication each of our elected members make in fulfilling their role, along with the scrutiny and criticism with which they endure as they work towards making a positive difference in our community. Thank you, Mayor and councillors, for all of the hard work and everything you do for this city. Page 10 of our annual report explains Council's strategic planning framework. This annual report, along with the financial statements, is an important part of Council's accountability and measuring performance and progress against the long-term strategic plan. Council's workforce is made up of 172 full-time, part-time and casual staff. Across this year, that equated to 140.68 full-time equivalent employees, which was down approximately 6 FTEs on the previous year. That was primarily driven by the closure of some services due to COVID. I've been very proud of the way our staff have responded to the challenges of the COVID pandemic. They've been willing to do what's necessary to change and adapt across all of the diverse services which Council provides, and I'd like to publicly thank all our staff for the valuable contribution that they each make to our city. The 5 key goals in Council's strategic plan, like I said, under each section there's highlights and actions that have been achieved. I won't go through each of those in detail, but I'll just touch on one from each of the goals. So goal 1, living lightly on our environment. Council committed during the year to the City's Power Partnership, one of the few Tasmanian councils to do so, and we've signed up to a commitment there of 5 key pledges which are aimed at reducing our carbon footprint. Goal 2, building a unique city. Council has continued to invest heavily in this space, and there are many highlights. However, Living City continues to be a focus for Council as we start to see the benefits of the early investment in this once-in-a-generational transformational project, with the increasing business confidence, growth and development, and importantly the new jobs. Construction on the Waterfront Hotel and the Parkland has underpinned construction activity during the year. Providore Place is in a much stronger position than 12 months ago, with close to full occupancy across the commercial tenancies and commencement of regular events and markets in the pavilion. An expression of interest process for suitable developments on a number of key CBD sites has also progressed well during the year and will underpin the next phase of private investment in the city. COVID restrictions did impact and change many of our events and activities that fit under goal number 3, growing a vibrant economy. However, in November, Devonport was honoured to host the Governor-General, His Excellency the Honourable David Hurley and Her Excellency Mrs Hurley, for a 2-day visit to the city. They certainly made the most of their 2 days, Mayor, in Devonport, going from one event to the next, and left a lasting impression with those that they met with. Goal 4, building quality of life. This goal captures the many cultural and recreational services which Council provides. Of note, during the year, Council, after a thorough review, made the decision to transfer the ownership of the historic Julie Burgess fishing ketch to an independent, not-for-profit organisation, headed up by many of the passionate volunteers who had previously been involved in supporting the vessel. This outcome provides an opportunity for the community members to grow and build the profile of the historic vessel, and reduces Council's financial and operational exposure. And it was great to see yesterday the Julie Burgess heading out on its first commercial sailing of this sailing season. Goal 5, practising excellence in governance. The 5th goal in the strategic plan involves excellence in governance. Whilst many operational and improvements have occurred in this space, it's the it's Council's digital transformation that clearly stands out. Since embarking on a whole-of-council digital transformation program in 2018, over 40 discrete projects of varying scale and complexity have been initiated and completed. There's no question that under the guidance of our Deputy General Manager, Jeff Griffith, Devonport is becoming a leader across the state in this digital space. This was recognised during the year, with Council being fortunate to win 2 major statewide awards, being the Local Government Professionals Innovation Award and followed by the much sought after Legat Annual Award for Excellence. To complete the report, a full set of the financial statements are provided as an attachment, along with an unqualified audit opinion from the Tasmanian Audit Office. The income statement outlines details of the $2 million operating surplus for 2021 that I mentioned earlier. On the balance sheet, the net assets, or the net worth of Council, increased by $40 million to $605 million. Total debt was reduced from $50.02 million down to $47.9 million, in line with our anticipated principal and interest repayments detailed in Council's long-term financial management strategy. With the expiry of some existing loan swaps, Council took the opportunity this year to put in place a new debt structure, securing payments over various terms for up to 20 years and reducing annual interest costs down to $900,000 per annum. It is worth noting that this is $200,000 less than the $1.1 million that Council is currently budgeted to receive from commercial rent. There's a number of questions, Mayor, on notice which were received regarding the annual report, and responses have been provided as attachments to the agenda on tonight's meeting. So, Madam Mayor, I trust this provides a brief overview, and I commend the annual report to you for 2021. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we need a mover in a second?
No.
Thank you, Mr Atkins. Can I just endorse your comments around how the staff have worked so hard over the last 12 months and their support for myself as Mayor and for my fellow councillors. I know it's not been an easy time, but I'm certainly very pleased to stand up and accept the award from at the local government conference on behalf of all of the team. So thank you for that. Moving on, there will be opportunity to ask questions at the end of the business that's in the agenda, if anyone has any questions. Item 6 is, as the General Manager has said, submissions and questions and subsequent answers already presented in writing, and those submissions and questions have been responded to, and there are copies of those on the attachments to the agenda. I would ask for a mover and seconder that those questions and responses be noted. Could I have a mover, please? Thank you, Councillor Perry. Councillor Murphy. Councillor Perry, any comment? Thank you, Councillor Perry. Any other comment, question related to that item? Councillor Perry, to close. Thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour. On the questions and answers, yes, you may. Can you come to the lectern with your name and address and
Malcolm Gardam, 4 Beaumont Drive, Mindetta. I'll be voting against noting of those questions and answers, Madam Chair, because on many occasions the questions are not answered, as unfortunately is typical of a lot of responses we get. So I will be voting against it just on that principle.
As is your prerogative, Mr Gardam.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I have closed the debate. I will put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Sorry? Thank you. 24 for the motion. Those against the motion, please raise your hand. And 6 against. 7? 7. Thank you. The motion is carried. Thank you. Item 7 are motions on notice that we have received previously. Item 7.1 is a notice of motion from Mr Trevor Smith regarding footpaths. Mr Smith, your motion is on the... Up there.
Yep.
And you've put the motion as is. You didn't want to change it?
Name and address first?
Yes, please.
Right. Trevor Smith, 7 Glen Court, Devonport. Mayor, I move that councils be requested to allocate some, if not all, of the $2 million surplus funds council received for the 2020-21 financial year towards the construction of footpaths, particularly in areas where residents have paid rates for more than 40 more years. Also prioritising the streets where the residents and or public have constantly requested that footpaths be provided.
Thank you, Mr Smith. I will ask for a seconder, please. There is no... Mr Russell as the seconder of the motion. Thank you. You may speak to the motion, Mr Smith.
Right.
Thank you.
I understand that councils have a duty of care and an obligation to provide a safe environment, not only for drivers of vehicles, but also pedestrians. Over the years, your council appears to have given, in many instances, secondary consideration to the provision of footpaths which are necessary to provide safety for the public, in particular children and the elderly of this city who are forced to walk onto the roadway. This is evidenced by the amount of long-established streets where residents, some who have been paying rates for over 40 or more years and still waiting to have footpaths, whilst others have the pleasure of footpaths on both sides of the street. And the council never appears to be short of cash for all sorts of other things, such as multi-million-dollar walkway, however, neglects providing the basic essentials which they should provide. Surely it is a poor state of affairs when some ratepayers are told they cannot expect suitable footpaths in their street for a considerable amount of years or the foreseeable future because the council considers that they are not a priority. I ask you all to vote in favour of my motion.
Thank you, Mr Smith. Mr Russell, as the seconder of the motion, did you wish to speak?
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. I'll ask you back to the lectern, Mr Smith, when we close the debate.
Rodney Russell, 225 Steele Street, Devonport. Yes, I fully support what Mr Smith says, as I have said something similar at times at Devonport City Council meetings. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers to the motion? Mr Vellicott. Mr Smith, would you mind sitting down until... Thank you. We just need to be COVID safe.
Thank you. Bob Vellicott, 11 Cocker Place. Yes, Mayor, I certainly support Mr Trevor Smith in his motion, inasmuch that I agree councils have a duty of care and obligation to provide a safe environment for both for the vehicle drivers and also the pedestrians. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? Mr Gardam.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just briefly, I've got to say that the footpath, installation of new footpaths and replacement footpaths around the municipality is pretty baffling, I think, to a lot of the residents of Devonport when they see things going up. I mean, we've got, and it's been explained, a footpath around a gum tree up in Lovett Street, which is about, 25, 30 metres of footpath to go around a gum tree because of reasons with bikes alignment to the road, apparently. My instance down near me, we had a footpath that was broken up because of trees, gum trees, and it's a vacant block and people accessing the block to slash it, and that had broke the concrete up. Council came along because it was not safe because of the difference in some of the slabs, and it got replaced. Now that footpath goes nowhere. It goes to the block, the bush there, one house below me, and the whole thing got pulled up. I mean, I'm very grateful that it is, but it's probably got one person a week walking on it. So when people look at walkability and parts of Devonport that don't even have a concrete footpath either side of the road, I mean, they really do scratch their head at the priorities of council, and I think council probably needs to focus itself a little bit more on that than all the things we see which are pretty visible to people. And if safety is such an issue, a lot of those places that haven't got footpaths could well warrant a better safety from that. So I'll support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Gardam. Are there any other comments, questions? I will ask Mr Smith to close the debate, please.
Right. I'll close the debate, and hopefully the things will be improving in the next 12 months or sooner. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I will put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. For. All those against the motion, please raise your hand. Uh, 18 for, 17 against. The motion is carried. Thank you. Item 7.2, couldn't get much closer than that, could you? Item 7.2 is a notice of motion from Mr Vellacott around disposal by auction of Providore Place. Mr Vellacott, you have the floor. I will ask for your name and address as we start, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I move the motion that the electors here present at this, the Devonport City Council 2021 Annual General Meeting, request the Mayor and councillors to take such action necessary for the early sale of the real estate known as Providore Place, so as to enable it to be listed for sale by auction at a reserve price to be decided by the council, and if the property is sold, the proceeds of the sale be paid off the council debt incurred to build it.
Thank you, Mr Vellacott. Is there a seconder for the motion, please? Mr Nevin, thank you. Mr Vellacott, you have the floor.
Can I speak?
Go ahead.
Thank you. The rationale to sell Providore Place. Providore Place has hemorrhaged ratepayers' funds from day one and continues to do so. When the operational costs and loan payments are taken into account, it is not a community asset in the sense of the Forbes Street Sporting Complex or numerous other community facilities. There is no reason that what Providore Place has morphed into out of necessity due to it failing to achieve any of the original deliverables as promoted by council cannot be managed by a private owner. I request the opportunity to speak further on the motion, Mayor.
Mr Vellacott, you will have an opportunity to close the debate. However, I won't allow you to add anything new at the end. If you want to introduce something else, now is your chance.
Good, thank you, Mayor. Thank you. This is only but a brief resume of the reasons why council should sell the property known as Providore Place. It has been openly admitted by a councillor that the strategic purpose for holding Providore Place is no longer valid. The property current use bears little semblance to what was originally spruiked. It's everything that it wasn't supposed to be. Ratepayers were seriously misled when told a yearly income of $400,000 was guaranteed.
Mr Vellacott, this is all already well established. If you have something new to bring into the debate, now is your chance.
Right. So, okay, all right. Council are now directly competing with the private sector. Council has said it recognises the value of transparency and accountability. Bearing that in mind, the continuing secrecy of most matters pertaining to the premises, the evasive answers and responses given to questions asked, as well as the avoidance of answering many questions is of great concern. Sunlight is a wonderful thing. Providore Place has so many issues under the private sector Providore Place has so many issues, only the private sector can realistically provide the level of incentives needed for the premises so as for them to be free of criticism from other retailers and comply at all times with fair trading. It's a well-known fact that when councils get involved in businesses, there is always unintended consequences. If this property remains in council hands, it will be a continuing encumbrance or millstone around the necks for ratepayers and future councillors. I believe the recent government valuation indicates that it is worth some 5.7 million less than its original cost, and in my opinion indicates that something must be remiss in its planning. Last view. Councillors must face the facts and be honest, because if they do not support this motion to sell the property, the real reason it will
Mr.
be because
Vellacott,
it crystallises a loss of monumental
Mr Vellacott,
proportion.
that's enough.
I'm finishing, Mayor.
You have finished, thank you.
Proportion that
Mr Vellacott, you're finished, thank you. Your time's up.
Thank
You'll
you.
have the opportunity to close the debate.
I will do, thank you.
Mr Nevin, as the seconder of the motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Firstly, it's important to understand that this motion only refers to Providore Place and not to Market Square. So events held in Market Square are not affected. Similarly, the monthly market can still be held and council could easily negotiate access to the undercover area in Providore Place or require this as a condition of the sale. The current tenants are not affected as the Providore Place building will be sold subject to the existing leases. The principle is exactly the same as when the council sold 43% of the Paranaple Centre. The building is still there, people can still use the library and the service centre, but council doesn't own them. If it is not a good idea to sell Providore Place, then it wasn't a good idea to sell nearly half of the Paranaple Centre. The council is able to put any requirements it likes in the auction conditions of sale, including that the federal government does not require any repayment. So council doesn't have to sell if the reserve isn't reached. Council doesn't have to sell if the relevant minister insists on repayment of any of the funding, but within a federal election coming soon and in a marginal electorate, that's unlikely. A big advantage in adopting this motion is this, that it will put council back on the track to its core objectives. It is clear that speculative commercial property development and operating the business of a commercial landlord are not core objectives of a council. Many are questioning whether the council has forgotten its core objectives. If residents are waiting over 40 years for a footpath, something's wrong. Now, one of the biggest issues with Providore Place is that it is considered to be a prime example of the council unfairly competing with other commercial landlords and businesses. The council is seen as taxing ratepayers, including commercial landlords and businesses, then using those taxes not only to compete with them, but to promote and assist council's tenants. This has created a genuine concern in the business community and the city. The council is well aware that this is not a good look and has been making these arrangements behind closed doors to avoid scrutiny.
Mr Nevin, I will ask you to be very careful in your language. Thank you. Carry on.
My
Thank you.
language?
Thank you.
Can I seek what I've said that is wrong?
The guidelines for the meeting clearly suggest that you do not. Let me just go back. Make personal reflections of councillors, council employees or members of the public. A council decision is completely different to councillors individually. I will ask you just to be careful of your language. Thank you. Thank you.
I do
Carry on.
understand your ruling, but I'll do my best.
Carry on. Thank you.
The sale of Providore Place would signal a change from this current direction, and that is what I've said about competition. The concept of the motion is for council to convert the building at Providore Place into money and use it to reduce debt before interest rates start rising. Do it now while tenants are in place, interest rates are low and rental returns look attractive in comparison, and while the real estate market is buoyant. The embarrassing part of the value of the building being much less than the cost is already out there and acknowledged, so that's no longer a reason to put off a sale. In summary, this motion sets council on a path to return to its core objectives, to reduce debt and to restore some trust in the council by moving away from what is seen as the current path of the council competing against its ratepayers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Nevin. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Jarman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I'd like to ask a question, if I may, through you to the General Manager, just on some validity of what Mr Nevin has just said. Is it... we've always been aware, if we've ever been discussing the possibility of ever being able to sell the Providore Place itself, that there is a caveat on the money that we got from the federal government. If you could just clarify what we've been told, and then I just might ask about some validity on what Mr Nevin has just been saying, please.
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor. There is a clause in the grant, the federal government grant, that requires council to maintain ownership for the first 5 years since the grant was signed off, which I believe was around the end of 2018. However, there may be provision to negotiate that with the government, but it could only be done with the government's approval.
Thank you. That helps me clarify on which way I'm going to vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Murphy.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I'll be speaking against the motion based on a number of factors, and Mr Nevin and Mr Vellacott spoke very eloquently in relation to, and they did raise some historical points. There's no denying any of that. The issue is that I think, and you know, this is something that I've been advocating for a long period of time within council, is that since it has been removed from private ownership, we've actually seen some positivity in the space. I've been a long-held believer in that the business model was flawed from the start, but there's no negating that. We can't argue that fact. But the point is that in its current format, it does provide an opportunity for this particular facility now to actually capture and utilise that space. So it provides another string to the bow for the Parramatta Centre. If it was to return into private hands, we lose that level of control, and then we lose what we would be able to do in that particular space. It's been proven in the last short period of time since council has taken the facility over that service clubs now have the opportunity to go in there and use that particular facility at a reasonable rate, not at a commercial rate. If we look at, in relation to the rent, yes, there's no denying it was forecast for the Providore Place, or now soon to be Market Square, was going to return a rental return of around about $400,000 per annum. It's not going to do that. But what it is doing is providing a rental return that is now seeing it being able to be, if you like, standalone. It covers its own debt. The other benefit of keeping the building is the benefit of depreciation and the utilisation of that depreciation in relation to determining our capital expenditure. Now, that is an important thing that we need to take into consideration, because if we don't have those assets to depreciate, it does have an impact on how much capital expenditure we can have or can spend on doing things like footpaths. So I don't see any benefit at this particular point in time in selling Market Square or Providore Place or 114 to 116 Best Street, as it's known. So I will be speaking against the motion. Voting against.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Mr Goodwin, did you wish to speak?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Grant Goodwin, Winchbeers Road, East Devonport. Without a doubt, there is merit in both sides of the argument in relation to what Bob puts up and also in relation to Councillor Murphy. But at the end of the day, this whole concept that we embarked on many years ago was all linked together. It all becomes part of the whole picture. There's a hotel being constructed at this point in time, and no doubt will be completed, I think, is it next year, General Manager? And you would hang on to Providore Place, get the hotel up and running, the parkland is finished, and you'll look at the entire picture of the revenue that it brings in relation to holding that property for a given length of time. There's nothing wrong with liquidating assets, absolutely. It's done in business right across the board. If you liquidate assets, you acquire assets as you continue on through a business life. But right at this point in time, I would vote against the motion, and we should certainly look to be prudent, hold the property and maybe visit it in a few years' time, just see how it lands. But right at this point in time, you would hold the property, you would not dispose of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Goodwin. Are there any other speakers? Mr Russell.
Rodney Russell, 225 Still Street, Devonport. Point of clarification. It cannot be sold for 5 years after 2018, but it can be sold after 5 years. Would that be right? It cannot be sold under 5 years, but it could be sold.
It can't be sold without negotiating with the federal government until at least 5 years after.
So it can be sold after 5 years?
It could be if that was the council's decision.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Are there any other speakers? Questions? Mr Gardam, you haven't spoken yet this time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We're probably
I will ask you to repeat your name and address, please.
Malcolm Gardam, 4 Beaumont Drive, Bondetta.
Thank you.
We're probably going to butt heads a little here in that you've already stopped Mr Devon from speaking, and what I had to say was for those here is to convince them or to give them a little history on Providore Place so they can understand the concerns that we've got if it stays in council hands.
Mr Gardam, I won't allow it. It's, the motion is for the future of Providore Place, not related to the past.
So you're going to gag me on those points?
I am, thank you.
Okay. Well, we'll try and see what I can find here to start. We won't start with the rent waivers and write-offs of 354.
Mr Gardam.
Yes. Or the 650 fit-outs. Sorry. Or the new lease with some money owing. I'll just start here, if I may, Madam Chair. Council's done its best to prevent all of the past issues with Providore Place from being made public.
Mr Gardam.
Yes. This is
Mr.
relevant.
Gardam, all of the history is well known to everyone in this room. It's well known.
It may not be known to everybody, Madam Chair, but I'm trying to convince people to vote for the motion.
The motion is about the future of Providore Place. It's not about the past. You may speak about the motion.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the question really is, can we trust council to be open and transparent as to the true cost of keeping Providore Place when we haven't been able to do so in the past? And will we be left with the impossible task of trying to deduce the ongoing costs from various accounting cost centres with no signal reporting facility? This is a positive motion with many advantages. It deserves a careful consideration and not a knee-jerk negative response by those unable to understand it. Forward thinking, commencing a process now, rather than simply passing the buck to future councils to deal with it. The cost of an auction would be a lot less than the legal fees spent on Providore Place. The cost would be minuscule compared to the unpaid rent not pursued, and the same applies to the council-funded fit-outs. An auction is open and
Mr. Garden,
transparent.
we've had this conversation. Move on.
An auction is open and transparent and fair to
It is,
everyone.
absolutely. That's a lovely sentence. Carry on.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Now, some might think, well, the council control who the tenants are. The reality is that this isn't true. The people of Devonport were promised 4 high-end restaurants and 7-day-a-week markets showcasing the produce of the region. What we have is a popular 1-day-a-month market, but what a miss that is, with 95%, that's a 95% miss with all the money and resources thrown at it. I'm sure even councillors would admit that the council has had to work hard to gain viable tenants in the building. The point is, now that tenders have been found and are presumably paying rent, it is time to test the market. Clearly, council should not be in the space of ratepayer subsidised premises for commercial entities competing with other commercial entities and family businesses, and therefore council should cut ratepayer losses and get out at the best price, while according to the newspaper reports, Providore Place has turned the corner, but I suspect it is far from financially breaking even. I urge you to support the motion for council to consider a sale of the property and with it divest a non-core business and along with it the ongoing ratepayer liabilities. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Garden. Are there any other speakers? I'll ask Mr. Vellacott to close the debate, reminding you that there's nothing new to be introduced at this point. Mr. Vellacott, you're summing up.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Pardon me. Just to clarify, I beg your pardon.
We'll get you a drink. Oh, you have a drink?
Just to clarify, I've got it, thank you. Just to clarify, we don't, the motion doesn't concern Market Square as such. And yes, we fully realise that there is a caveat on the sale from the federal government, and but it can be negotiated. Just to clarify that, it can be negotiated as far as I'm aware and my knowledge of that contract. I was pleased to hear both those who will support my motion and those who will no doubt slavishly vote against it. I consider those present will have, if nothing else, a better understanding about the past management and the real possibility of problems in the future if council continues to own and manages the food pavilion now known as Providore Place. I have nothing further to add and conclude by asking all electors present who have the best interest of this city to support this motion for council to consider selling Providore Place. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vellacott. I will put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. For, and those against, please raise your hand. (22). The motion is lost. Thank you. Moving on to item 7.3. A notice of motion from Mr. Vellacott re possible increase of gaming venues. Mr. Vellacott, you can put the motion.
Yes, Mayor, as you know, Robert Vellacott, 11 Cocker Place, Devonport. My motion is, Mayor, motion that we, the electors here present at the Devonport City Council 2021 Annual General Meeting, hereby express in the strongest possible terms our opposition to any increase in the number of licensed gaming devices in existing venues and or the licensing of new premises for the purpose of licensed gaming in the municipality. And we request our elected representatives, being the Mayor and councillors, to on our behalf oppose an application to A, increase gaming devices in any existing venues and or the installation of the devices in new premises, and B, refrain from supporting any person or entity seeking to obtain a licence to increase and or manage licensed gaming in Devonport.
Mr Vellacott, thank you. Is there a seconder to Mr Vellacott's motion? Mr Jones, is it up the back? Thank you. You may speak to the motion, Mr Vellacott. That's great. Mr Vellacott, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. It is well documented that poker machines and casinos are a proven blight on our community. The professional gambler David Walsh says he despises the pokies and considers them antisocial, unsightly and insidious. Well, he would certainly know, wouldn't he, David Walsh? There are enough reports of crime, domestic violence and child neglect as it is, and we don't need our politicians and local government condoning an increase in these problems through supporting more potential poker machine addictions in our community. For the council to support or encourage an increase of licensed gaming venues or increase the number of devices that would siphon off funds that would otherwise be spent in the community would make a mockery of their contention that one of the main reasons for Living City project, when completed, was to inject funds into Devonport. In Devonport, the average loss in recent years per adult was approximately $645, and the total annual loss was approximately $12 million. With those types of losses, that's a lot of money going out of the city into somebody else's pocket, where it could be better spent within the community. Recent research indicates electronic gaming machines, pokies, are built for addiction. The anticipation of playing hits the pleasure centre of the brain and the same force as cocaine or ice. In 2019, net gambling revenue per machine in Tasmania, or Devonport in particular, was $46,151. I won't go through all the others. Whilst it is concerning, banning pokies will not stop gambling problems. However, every effort must be made to restrict the number of the devices and the easy access to them. Unfortunately, time and time again, we find many politicians of all stripes and colours losing sight of their moral compasses on important social issues, and hopefully our councillors, knowing that Devonport has a large population of socially and economically vulnerable people, will have the moral strength to oppose any increase of gaming licences now and into the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Vellacott. Mr Jones, as you don't wish to speak? Thank you. Are there any other speakers? I've got Mr Goodwin and then I'll come to councillors at the front.
Madam Mayor, if I may, and through you, is this something that comes to council in relation? I mean, I certainly understand where Mr Vellacott's going and very meritorious in relation to that. They are a blight on society. There's no doubt, and evidence will show that. But is it something that council get involved in from the point of view of licensed applications or not?
You're correct. We don't have any licensing function or anything like that. I guess our role would be to advocate for our community if such a situation arose. But
So
thank
if
you for the
for
question.
argument's sake, if the new hotel applies for a gaming licence, they'll do that through federal
State
hotels, I
government.
suppose, and all you can do then is just oppose it if so required.
That would be the case. Thank you, Mr.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you. Councillor Murphy?
Thank you, Mayor. I think Mr Goodwin's probably hit the nail on the head. It does, I think from a statutory perspective, we don't necessarily have, even though I morally support what Mr Vellicott's motion, the issue is if we do undertake such a stance, potentially we are exposing ratepayers to litigation in relation to the fact that we don't have that statutory role in being able to do so. I think if we were to take a different perspective and the motion was worded differently, we could most certainly advocate that we don't support gaming and gaming machines in the Devonport municipality, but as the motion is read or written there, it potentially does leave us exposed.
Thank you. Councillor Perry?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I agree with the previous two speakers, and I also understand Mr Vellicott's sentiment built into the motion, but the fact is that it is outside of council's jurisdiction, and I guess should an application come before council at some time in the future, it may still be outside council's jurisdiction, but if there was a groundswell of support in the community for the gaming licences not to be issued, then perhaps we could make a statement at that time, but there is no appetite for that at the moment. There's no application that I'm aware of. I'm not aware of one that may be coming in the future. Mr Vellicott may be, but as it stands now, I don't think the motion's necessary, and should we need to revisit it at some time in the future, that I'm sure we will, and give it consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. Are there any other speakers to the motion? Councillor Hollister?
I'll be speaking against the motion. We all know from the past history that prohibition never works. All the money that goes out of this town now will still go out of town. People will change to internet banking, internet gambling. So there will be no difference. And I've said for 10 years now, or longer, to premiers, to developers here for the hotel, that this casino should have been in the hotel as well. From the point of view of tourism, people coming here, we'd have more people through the airport, more people on the ships. So I'm definitely against the motion.
Thank you. Make it clear that that was Councillor Hollister's personal opinion. Thank you. Are there any other comments? Mr Gardam?
Yeah, Malcolm Gardam, 4 Beaumont Drive. It's just very interesting listening to the speakers, and all I'd like to say is when the councillors vote against it, which I'm sure they will, and I'd just like to remind council in the future, and former Alderman Goodwin down there said it's outside the purview of council, and that may well be, but I'd just like to remind councillors there are a whole lot of hobby horses that come on councils these days with people wanting to do things like Australia Day and all sorts of things. I'd just suggest that if you're against taking a stand on this, you're against taking a stand on fish farms, say Australia Day, and other hobby horses that come to council. You need to be consistent into the future and stick with the core business of council and not get tangled up in other people's as I say, hobby horses. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr Gardam. As always, your advice is taken on board. Are there any other speakers? Mr Vellacott, I'll ask you to close the debate.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, some may argue council should not be involved with social issues such as gambling and in particular the installation and use of poker machines.
Mr Vellacott, Mr Vellacott, just 1 second. Can I just clarify that every comment was not that we shouldn't be, that it is that we currently aren't. All of the comments that were made are that council is not currently, does not currently have a role to play. It's not that we shouldn't or that we don't think we should.
Okay.
Just to clarify. Thank you.
Thank you. That may be so. However, many examples can be given where council has and continues to be involved in other issues such as roads, rubbish and footpaths. To those who may oppose my notice of motion, I won't pansy around and ask or say, are you really comfortable if our elected members give support to a business that profits from those vulnerable poor wretches in our society who are addicted to poker machines? Surely you will have no warm, fuzzy feelings if you vote against my motion, knowing that those who monopolise this corrupt and parasitical industry are amongst the wealthiest in Australia and who receive and enjoy the profits.
Thank you. Mr Vellacott, your comments, you need to be very careful about members of our community and your comments, so thank you.
They are truthful comments.
Well, they're your opinion, Mr Vellacott. Thank you.
Amount, I think, wealthiest in Australia. These are the same people who receive and enjoy the profits, who also donate large amounts of money to the political parties for no other purpose, I would opine, than to bribe them so as to keep in favour.
Again, Mr Vellacott, that is enough. That's enough. Thank you.
Sorry, Mayor, last line. Whilst to top it off, the government sponges on Anglicare, Lifeline and the Salvos and others who support those unfortunate individuals and families affected by these hideous machines. I conclude by saying thank you for all those for and against for attending tonight and exercising your democratic rights of free speech. I look forward to a favourable result.
Thank you, Mr Vellacott. I'll close the debate and put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Fourteen in favour. I will ask those against the motion to raise your hand. (19). 14, 19. The motion is lost. Thank you. Items 7.4 and 7.5, and I will remind you that Councillor Murphy, Councillor Milbourne, Councillor Perry, Councillor Laycock, Councillor Hollister and myself will be declaring a possible or perceived interest in these next two items on not taking part or voting. And I have asked the Deputy Mayor to take the chair for these two items. Thank you.
It's nice to have it there too. Okay, thank you for that. So we have item 7.4, notice of motion from Mr Vellacott. If he would like to move his motion, thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I move that the electors here present request that Council rescind the resolution. Sorry, I beg your pardon.
No.
Motion 1.
Thank you.
That we, the electors and ratepayers here present, express our extreme disappointment in the Mayor and those councillors who voted at the Devonport City Council ordinary meeting of the 22nd of February to reject the request as per the notice of motion as passed by a majority of electors at the AGM of 2020 annual general meeting, being that council at the next meeting consider providing all ratepayers of 50 years or more with parking vouchers as provided to pensioners.
Thank you. If I could have a seconder to that motion, please. Mr Janney. Thank you. Would you like to speak to that motion? You consider not to? Thank you. Mr Vellacott.
Yes, I'd speak.
Continue.
Firstly, the long-term ratepayers who have been deprived... Firstly, the long-term ratepayers who have been who would derive some benefit if council had approved to provide the vouchers are grateful for their support given by Deputy Mayor Councillor Alison Jarman and Councillor John Alexio, who spoke and voted against the motion as per the agenda of 5.2 of the 22nd of February 2021. Some of their comments were, we can get rid of some of the debt for people that owe us money and we forgive them and let them do whatever they like to us. Then they've got people that have been paying rates to us for over 50 years and we give them a lunch. And the numbers that were put to us for how much it's going to cost the ratepayers don't add up to me. Also of note was the unequivocal support given by the Devonport Chamber of Commerce and Industry, not only at the 2020 annual general meeting, but also afterwards in the media. It appears council, by their rejection of the motion passed by a vast majority of ratepayers at the 2020 annual general meeting, was, for want of a better description, at best a penny-pinching exercise. The motion was carried 39 for and 3 against. One of the feeble reasons given to disallow the vouchers was that by extending the concession, it could not be done fairly and equitably because it was not possible to confirm a ratepayer had paid for 50 years. In regard to that, Councillor Jarman was correct in saying council would be able to work out who paid rates for 50 years pretty quickly. I don't think there are going to be that many people. Well may the matter of the cost be used as an excuse. However, most of council have no qualms in subsidising the foreign-owned waterfront hotel by selling that section of the Harriscarf site at vacant land at a square metre rate, having bought it and developed property price in the process, dropping some $750,000 or just $750,000. Nor about using ratepayers' funds to provide the necessary access road for the hotel. Council appears to overlook the demographics of residents and importance of encouraging people into the central business district by their continual reduction of easy accessible and economical car parking. This situation of reduced patronage in the CBD will be exacerbated when the very convenient and easily accessible Edward Street car park is sold. By council's actions, it appears as if they have a policy to sabotage the central business district. Also, if the proposed new shopping complex...
Just be aware of what you're saying, please.
Well, this was printed in the agenda.
I know,
yeah,
I'm just pointing it out, please.
So also, if the proposed new shopping complex with free parking is constructed adjacent to the Homemaker Centre, it will, I suggest, have a further impact on the future viability of the CBD. I look forward to all present supporting my motions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comment from anyone, please? Mr Nevin. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham Nevin, 145 Percy Street. Just one thing I'd like to add to the motion, or in support of it. It is very easy to determine who has paid rates for 50 years in this community. and for the council or anyone else to say otherwise is absolutely and utterly incorrect.
Thank you, Mr Nevin. Any further comment from anyone for the motion? I will just make a comment, if I may, in my position here. I take it very seriously in what I sign up to do as a councillor, and I must abide by council's decisions. So I'm very aware that even though I chose to vote against a motion at the time in February, I must abide by council's decisions. So I am very aware of that. It's an act that we follow. Thank you. Mr Vellicott, if you'd like to close, please.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Nothing further to add, thank you.
Thank you. So we will have the vote, please. So for? Keep your hands up, please. 15. Thank you. And against? Am I allowed to vote, please? 8. So 15 for and 8 against. It is carried. Thank you. So item 7.5, we also have some declarations from, if I've got a list somewhere. Councillor Murphy, Councillor Milborn, Councillor Perry, Councillor Laycock, Councillor Hollister and Mayor Rockcliffe. And thank you. So item 7.5 is the notice of motion. Mr Vellicott, if you would like to move your motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Second motion, that the electors here present request that Council rescind resolution number 2129, passed at the 22nd of February 2021, being agenda item 5.2. That Council does not include ratepayers of 50 years or more into the parking concession which is offered to age, disability and service pensioners. Second by Ms.
Thank you. And second, Mr Janney. Thank you. Mr Janney, would you like to speak to the motion? No. Mr Vellicott.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I just want to make that clear that to those that, yes, it's a rescinding of that motion, meaning it clears the way for Council to go further to my next motion. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments, please? We'll consider no comments. Okay. Mr Vellicott, if you'd like to close.
Thank you, Mayor. I just hope all the people who
Mayor.
voted for the other one votes for this particular motion, and show some support to those citizens who have helped build this city. It's a very small reward indeed to them. Thank you.
Thank you. So those that are for to rescind the motion, please raise your hands. 14. And against? 5. Thank you. So it was carried. Mr Vellicott, I will ask for those that would like to, the Mayor would like to take back the chair. I don't think we've got any other declarations of interest in.
I have a third motion, Mayor.
Yes, but I'm just changing seats.
so I beg your
That's all I'm doing.
I beg your
It's okay. I don't think there's any other declarations of interest. Thank you. I haven't moved your pages.
Okay, we are at item 7.6 is a notice of motion from Mr Vellicott. Do you wish to put the motion, Mr Vellacott?
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. That the electors here present request council to include ratepayers of 50 years or more into the parking concession, which is offered to aged, disability and service pensioners.
Do I have a seconder for that motion? Mr Janney, I think's hand went up first. Mr Vellacott, thank you.
I think I've covered it all pretty well previously, Mayor. I think they're all over 21 and know the value of this motion. So I ask for those again who supported the last one to show their appreciation to our senior citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Vellacott. Mr Janney, did you wish to speak? Thank you. Are there any comments, questions? Any further comment? Speakers? Thank you, Mr Councillor Perry.
Thank you, Mayor. And it's just a question to the move of the motion. Mr Vellacott, do you stand to derive a benefit if this motion is successful tonight and subsequently successful?
Councillor Perry, I'll call you to order. Thank you. I'll call you.
You don't need to declare an interest. Thank you.
Councillor Perry, I will call you to order. Thank you. I have dealt, Councillor Vellacott, Mr Vellacott, I have dealt with Councillor Perry. Thank you. Are there any other comments? Anyone else wish to speak? I'll ask Mr Vellacott to close the debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I have nothing further to add. Thank you.
Thank you. I will ask those in favour of the motion to please raise your hand. (18)for. I will ask those against the motion to please raise your hand. The 18-9, the motion is carried. Thank you. That brings us to the end of the formal part of our meeting. We now have general business, the opportunity to ask questions of any item on our agenda or in the annual report. Mr Janney.
Thank you, Mayor Rockcliffe. The seating arrangement that my name's Douglas Janney, 23 Watkinson Street, Devonport. The seating arrangement that I have experienced at annual general meetings with the councillors seated facing the Mayor and Executive and their backs to the ratepayers who are present, I find this arrangement offensive. All ratepayers present ought to face the ratepayers who are present. And I have raised this before.
You have, Mr Janney, and I will ensure that it's taken on board because I take your point. It's a fair and reasonable comment. Thank you.
The hard copy of the annual report that I received is a dismal black and white and in two parts. There should be a clear plastic cover and a black looped spine and all in one document. This is a second year of such poor presentation. Go back and look at the 2019 report. Right, questions.
Thank you, Mr Janney.
The online report is in colour, so why is my hard copy in black and white?
Because it probably costs 5 times as much to print off black and white colour copies as it does black and white would be my suggestion. Certainly my experience in my workplace.
It's not good enough. Next question, why isn't the auditor's report part of the financial report? There's no auditor's report here. Where is it?
It is an attachment, is my understanding.
It's not with, sorry, it's not with the financial report. The auditor's report is on the financial report. Where is it?
Through you, Mayor, the two documents are posted on the website together. The full financials are the attachment, and the letter of the auditor is within the report document, but the two should be looked at as one.
But the auditor's report is part of about the financial report. It ought to be at the back of the financial report.
Thank you, Mr Janney. Did you have
Question
anything
3.
else?
The auditor's report was signed off on the 14th of September. Why can't the AGM be held within 3 weeks of that date?
Mr Atkins, did you want to?
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor, the financial report gets signed off. Council then needs to produce the annual report. We allow an opportunity for the community to make comment. Or prior to that, we allow an opportunity for councillors to have input into the draft, and then we make it available to the community. And then that timeline generally allows that the AGM is early November.
Thank you.
It's too long after the end of the financial year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Janney. I might just point out that I think we're one of the first councils on the coast, second council on the coast to actually conduct our AGM, so I think we're doing okay. I do take your point. It is a long time since the end of the AGM, end of the financial year. However, we have policies and processes to follow. Are there any other questions? Mr Gardam.
Madam Chair, I've got 3 items here that I'd just like to comment on, and each has a couple of questions.
I will remind you of your time frame.
Yeah, I've got 3 items, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. My question 1 here is, with reference to a council response to a question on notice on page 19 of the agenda attachments relating to bad and doubtful debts by area of operation, council has advised an amount of $28,046 against development and health fees. Accordingly, will council clarify the following separately? The combination of development and health fees seems a strange marriage of costs, so will council elaborate just what development entails under that heading?
You want to take that on notice?
I asked about debt by area of operation.
Just hold on.
You understand? It's
Mr.
okay.
Gardner.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Hold your calm
I have
down.
lots of time.
Ms.
It was a
Payne.
response in the
Mr Gardam,
agenda.
just hold on.
Okay.
Settle.
Sorry. Just trying to help.
Through you, Madam Mayor.
Not being helpful, thank you.
Sorry,
Ms.
Mayor.
Peebles, thank you.
Through you, Madam Mayor, you asked for clarification of department, and development and health is a department of council.
Development Health is a department. So what does the development take into account?
Planning and all other associated application fees.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So just more specifically, does development encompass council's commercial activities?
Is this your second question, Mr Gardner?
Have I only got 3 questions, Madam Chair, all up?
I'll take that under advisement, Mr
So
Gardner.
this is the first item, Madam Chair. So does that take in commercial leases under development? No, thank you very much then.
Thank you.
It's fair to say some bad and doubtful debts relate. Well,
You have a question, Mr Gardner?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
On that basis, will council advise under which area of operation the bad and doubtful debts being listed on as 90 days and over and 3 years or more, as discussed in closed session at the July ordinary meeting, are included? Where are they? Are they in there? That's bad and doubtful debts. There was an item for closed session in July. Where are they?
Through you, Madam Mayor, that report was considered in closed session, so I won't be commenting on those.
So I'm not accepting that question.
No, but you haven't declared where they were or what they were. You've told us there are bad and doubtful debts.
Mr Gardner, The item's been discussed in a closed session of council, and you know very well that unless the council members decide to release it, that's where it will stay.
I'm not asking for specific. So if you...
Mr Gardam,
sorry.
move on,
Okay.
please.
I guess if you discuss the financials in closed session, we won't get a copy of financials at the end of the year. Just on Providore Place, this is the second item, Madam Chair. In January 2020, Council fully disclosed the fit-out costs for the then existing tenants of Providore Place, being the former Chas Chip Company was $189,000, Charlotte Jack $221, Southern Wild Distillery $217, Redline $8,007. In light of these generous fit-out costs being subsidised by ratepayers for first tenants, will Council confirm if any fit-out costs whatsoever are being provided for the new Island State Brewing tenant? Any fit-out costs being provided?
Yeah, through you, Mayor. The commercial arrangements council have with the tenants, the information that can be disclosed has been. We've made public comment in regard to that previously. I think we reassured, in that comment for memory, we reassured Mr Gardam at the time that the rent was reflective of the commercial realities, including any contribution.
So it's like the previous ones are going to take 18 months to hear about them. Okay, question. Council has previously funded the tenant-specific base build cost for the first tenant. Accordingly, is Council doing the same in the Island State Brewery tenants? And if so, what is the contract price for those works? And if not contracted, then what is the budget amount?
Mr Gardam, I'm getting a bit punch-drunk. Mr Gardam, that question has been asked and you've had the response that you're getting. Thank you.
Sorry?
I know it's a different question, but we've already explained to you that we've
It's all confidential again. Okay.
That's enough,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Gardam.
Okay, well, I was going to ask whether you're paying them and whether Council's managing the work or whether you're paying them and they're managing the work. I understand you've got to do base build. It wasn't done. And
They're
my last...
managing the work. You're going to ask what, Mr.
Sorry?
Gardam? What was your question? I didn't say you couldn't ask any more.
Well, the last question I had was, if Council is funding the base build costs for Island State Brewing, then is Council managing the work or paying the tenant for the work and to manage it? I understand you're doing base build over there because that was part and parcel of the work that wasn't done because you had no tenant when the place was built.
Thank you.
Okay.
You ask a question, give us time to answer it. Thank
Through you, Mayor, I'll take that on notice and come back to Mr Gardam in writing with the details.
I appreciate that, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Are there
And
any
the
other-
last one, Madam Chair, if you bear with me, is to do with the waterfront parkland down here. Now, over the last 12 months, the Council has made much of supposed significant progress on the waterfront parkland redevelopment contract, including in newspaper, radio, and in the current annual report. In the current annual report on page 18, it says the last 12 months have seen significant progress on the second major stage of Living City of the new waterfront park precinct. Now, the following comments I'm going to make are made without any criticism whatsoever of Voss Construction, the parkland contractor. In fact, I feel for the contractor. It was first reported in March 2020 that the hotel was due for completion late December 21, so clearly significant delays have occurred in the hotel construction, including initial commencement on site, and through the necessity to occupy the waterfront site longer has impacted significantly on Voss's progress. Now, the General Manager has at least twice advised in writing that neither contractor is delaying the other. However, it is clear to anyone familiar with commercial construction that Voss has been unduly hampered by an arrangement between Council and the hotel developer granting occupation of a substantial area of the parkland site to facilitate the hotel construction. So as to significant progress, the facts do not quite support the Council's statements.
You do have a question, Mr Gardam?
Yes.
You have a question?
I'm making comments.
Okay,
Thank you.
on. Thank you.
The waterfront parkland contract was awarded in September 2019 for just under $17 million and described by Council as works are scheduled to commence during October 2019 and likely to be completed by spring 21, which of itself, a 2-year contract period, is a long time for this work. In June 20, Council confidently stated, with only about a year to go before its expected opening, meaning June 2021. Since then, and over an almost 2-year period, the contractor has only been able to productively complete about $5.8 million of work to the 30th of June 21, with over $11 million of work carried forward for completion in the 21-22 financial year. The actual expenditure for Living City in the 2021 financial year was stated in the October meeting agenda as being just under $4 million. In other words, that means about $11 million of work, that's about 65% of the original contract amount, 65%, is still to be completed after the supposed likely completion in spring 21 or the earlier June 21, as previously stated by Council. Council has repeatedly refused for over 12 months now to advise as to the current date for practical completion of the waterfront parkland contract. So accordingly, I'll ask the following as separate questions. The question, is time at large on this contract, meaning that the contract date for completion, being the adjusted date for practical completion, is no longer effective and therefore no longer contractually enforceable, other than the contractor must complete the works in a reasonable time?
Through you, Mayor, no, the answer is no, that's not correct. There's still, we have a contractual arrangement with VOS in place.
But you won't tell me the adjusted date for practical completion? No. Okay. My second question then, Madam Chair. As Council continues to refuse to disclose an actual completion date for the waterfront parkland contract, will Council at least advise ratepayers what month next year it expects full completion of the contract, including the elevated walkway? What month do you think we might have it all completed for the public?
Through you, Mayor, Council's continued to provide updates to the community on the progress of the waterfront park and will continue to do so. And as soon as new information becomes available, we've done that regularly through the project and we'll continue to do so. And
so you won't tell us when it's supposed to be finished? This is a bit like a consultant. We can all see from the road where we're at. You're telling us where we're at.
Mr Garland, your question's been asked and answered.
Yes, it's like...
Did you have another question?
Do you want to see me watch and tell me the time? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Were there any other comments, questions? Mr Russell.
Rodney Russell, 225 Steele Street, Devonport. In regards to Mr Gardam's question where the General Manager said he would reply in writing...
It will be included in the minutes of the agenda and the minutes of the meeting.
Which are available when? Next
They
council
will
meeting or
be
next...
in our council agenda in a couple of weeks.
Thank you. Mr Jenny beat me to the question too. At the beginning of the meeting, you asked the councillors to stand up and face the audience, which is a good idea, but I also would like to see them sitting over there, facing that way.
Thank you. As I said to Mr Janney, I accept his criticism and we've noted it. Thank you. And
for our audience's benefit and also for those online.
Thank you, Mr Russell. I have already said that I will accept that.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Any other comments? Mr Vellacott?
Thank you, Mayor. This is... I just want to make a clarification in regards to Providore Place. I cast no aspersions to the tenants in the regard to that property. But my question now is, will Council please treat all contracts and business pertaining to Providore Place in the same way as all other contracts and not in closed session? I think you are all aware of my thoughts over the years on that. I believe had you stuck to that, half your problems wouldn't be here tonight, half of those problems wouldn't have arisen.
Thank you, Mr Vellacott.
Will you please
as you would understand,
refrain,
as you would understand, that is not always necessarily possible. However, given the statistics that we put in our annual meeting around how many items we considered in closed session compared to open session, I hope you will realise that we consider everything that we possibly can in open session, given people's right to privacy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Mr Nevin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In light of your response to Mr Vellacott, my question is, do you agree, Madam Mayor, that every operational decision in relation to Providore Place since July 2016 has been made in closed session?
I'm sorry, I missed the question was?
Do you agree that every operational decision regarding Providore Place since July 2016 has been made in closed session?
I would expect that that's probably close to the case. However, without going back to every decision over the last 5.5 years, I'm not prepared to agree with that, but I'll take your comment as comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments, questions? In that case, I will call the meeting to a close. I want to thank you all for your patience, and hopefully you can see that council's going pretty well. The city's looking pretty good. Thank you all for your attendance and your interest in our city. Thank you, councillors. Thank you, staff. Good evening. Travel safe.